Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out to join us on our Connected Ocean webinar from all around the world. And thank you all for your support that allows us to be a voice for whales and dolphins and stimulate ocean action and help create a world where every single one of them can swim safe and free. So my name's Ed Goodall, and I work at WDC, and I have one of the best jobs in the world that I'm very grateful for every single day because I get to lead our international policy change work, aiming to make the ocean a safer place for whales and dolphins. And I get to work with incredible people here at Whale and Dolphin Conservation, in governments from all over the planet, and with other amazing animal heroes in other organizations. So that's a good point for me to let my colleague and good friend Silvia Mantilla introduce herself live from Colombia.
Thanks, Ed. Nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Silvia Mantilla. I am Colombian, hence I'm in Colombia right now. I am the Global Policy and Communications Manager at the World Federation for Animals. We are a group of 70 plus NGOs from around the world, including whale and dolphin conservation, and we work together to achieve global impact for animals together.
Thank you, Silvia. It's nice to have you here. So, a bit of housekeeping before we jump in. If you've got any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A function to submit them. We'll address as many as we can as we're going through the webinar, but there will be a dedicated Q&A session at the end. Feel free to use the chat function to interact with other attendees and share your thoughts or experiences throughout the session. We'd just really love to hear from you. We've also got a few polls that are going on throughout, so please do join in with them. And if you've got any technical issues, you can email my lovely colleagues at fundraising@whales.org, and they'll be able to help you out. So in today's webinar, Silvia and I are going to have a little back and forth chat so that you, our supporters, can hear about how whales and dolphins fit into the big issues of our time. And when I say that, I'm talking about climate change and biodiversity recovery. So we've got about an hour. So Silvia, let's jump in.
So, Ed, we know that our fate is deeply connected to and intertwined with nature, and that we need to look after nature so that it can help us. What is it that makes a healthy and functioning ocean?
So, a healthy ocean is one that's rich in biodiversity with thriving ecosystems that support all different forms of life, from the smallest plankton to the largest whales. It's an ocean where water quality is clean, where coral reefs are teeming with life, and where fish populations are thriving and not dwindling or crashing. We can think of the ocean as a giant circulatory system. Its currents help to regulate temperature and weather systems all across the globe. It absorbs CO2, up to 40% of human emissions, in fact, and has over millions of years provided us with 50% of the oxygen that's in the atmosphere, which we breathe every day.
Thanks, Ed. One of the things we actually talk about at the World Federation for Animals is the importance of animals to ecosystems. So it would be great if you can talk a bit about why are marine species essential for a sustainable ocean?
Yeah, sure. So sustainable is a word that has many meanings to many different people. And it's very clear that the way that we're interacting with the ocean currently doesn't really fit any definition of that word. Sustainability essentially means living in harmony. And we need to find ways to restore that which we've taken and ensure that the ocean and nature is thriving alongside us, treating it with care, compassion, and kindness. So let's talk a little bit about the beating heart of the ocean. And when I say that, I'm referring to the species that call it home. And every single organism in the ocean is playing a role in maintaining ocean health and balance. And whales and dolphins are often seen as icons of the ocean, but they're not just beautiful, incredible, intelligent, amazing creatures. They are essential to the health of many marine ecosystems. And at WDC, we've been talking about whales as ecosystem engineers of the ocean for several years now. hopefully there was a poll that popped up when I started talking. I haven't seen that pop up. Team, is that there? There we go. I'll give people a couple of minutes to respond to the poll before I carry on talking there. Okay, let's see what everybody thinks. Can we pop the answers up there, team? Okay. Well, that's really, really cool that the majority of people have already heard of the whale pump. Um, and there's a few people that haven't. So let me explain that for people that haven't heard of what that is. So when whales dive down deep in the ocean, when they return to the surface, they're bringing nutrient-rich cold water from the depths up to the surface, along with nutrient-rich poo from their darkness-dwelling prey that they've been eating down there in the depths. And that process is called the whale pump. So it's bringing things up from the depths up to the surface. And those things are nutrients. And those nutrients allow microscopic plants called phytoplankton to thrive. And they are the base of the entire marine food web. So more phytoplankton means more food for smaller fish, and then you get larger fish. It means more oxygen production for marine life that respire oxygen. It means more carbon fixed because they are photosynthesizing. So there's more carbon being stored in the ocean. And all of that is just lending to more and more biodiversity, which increases ocean stability and resilience. But whales and dolphins do more than just cycle nutrients. And for example, even when they die, whales, on their massive bodies, they contain huge amounts of carbon and they generally sink down to the deep sea, where they become an oasis for many different specialized deep sea creatures. And all of their organic carbon that was stored on their body is taken down there into the deep sea as well, and is locked away safely out of the atmosphere, potentially for thousands, maybe even millions of years. So when we protect whales and dolphins, we're helping to protect the whole delicate web of life that keeps the ocean functioning properly. And whales are just one example of that. Every species, really, from sea slugs to giant squid, are playing a role in that balance. But it's not just about individual species. Marine ecosystems like coral reefs, kelp forests, deep sea ecosystems, mangrove forests, they're all a key foundation of the entire ocean's resilience as well. And when ecosystems are healthy and diverse, they can recover more quickly from stresses, their habitats and their homes for the species that we've been talking about. And they act as buffers against extreme weather events, so they help protect human communities as well. And without those ecosystems and all the species which reside within them, that balance starts to break down and the ocean starts to suffer.
That's fascinating. So now that we know a bit about what makes a healthy and functioning ocean, and we know we need all the animals that live there, how does all that feed into the wider picture of a sustainable planet?
Okay, so let's zoom out and see how all of that stuff that we've been talking about, the species and the habitats in the ocean, how that connects into the bigger picture. So a healthy ocean is not just vital for that marine life that we've been talking about, it's vital for human life, and looking after the ocean really offers us hope with some of these big challenges that we're facing. And when we think of sustainability and fixing our relationship to the planet, it can sometimes feel quite overwhelming. I know I felt overwhelmed many times when thinking about these huge challenges that we're facing. And the challenges of climate change and pollution and biodiversity loss can really seem vast and insurmountable when we look at them on an individual level. But here's the uplifting part, really. Protecting the ocean is one of the most powerful things we can do to protect the entire planet. It covers over 70% of the surface of the Earth. So it's playing this really important role to help regulate the climate. It absorbs CO2, it produces oxygen, it provides us with resources for food, for livelihoods, energy, medicine, recreation, and loads more. And we really can make a difference in looking after the ocean, whether it's reducing our plastic consumption, thinking about where our goods come from, thinking about where our food comes from, advocating for marine protected areas, or speaking out against dangerous developments like new oil and gas drilling or deep sea mining. Every single one of those actions really does count. And the ocean responds to care when we take steps to protect it. And we're not only safeguarding species like whales and dolphins, but we're also protecting the future and the planet for all of us. Um, so there should have been a question that was popped into the chat for people to start responding to, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So going back to hope, I'm sure many of you know the story of the humpback whale. So they were once near extinction due to commercial whaling and hunting. But populations of humpbacks are now thriving, rebounding remarkably thanks to those conservation efforts and largely due to the moratorium on commercial whaling. And they've made a stunning comeback with some populations close to pre-hunting levels. And that's not just a story of a species bouncing back, it's a story of the ocean's resilience when we give it a chance. And it really is us that have given it that chance. And the humpbacks have come back because of decisions and policies that humans have made. And the same can happen for other species and for entire ecosystems. And some whale populations are taking much longer than others. Blue whales, for example, they will take much longer to recover and need a lot more different protections given to them than the humpbacks have had so that their populations can recover. But we are seeing progress elsewhere due to human interventions in a positive way. So coral reefs are being restored. People are breeding climate resilient corals and seeding them so that coral reefs can flourish once again. Marine protected areas are expanding all over the ocean, and so that we're giving it that space that it really needs to thrive and recover. And there is a lot of reason for optimism if we act, because we can see from these different examples, if we just give it that time and space and treat the ocean and the animals that live within it with care and kindness, then it all does start to come back. So thank you for some of the responses that are going into the chat there. So we just wanted to find out the kinds of things that you were doing in order to try and benefit the ocean. So thank you very much, Anita. It's great to see that involved in some dive cleanups. That's brilliant. It's going a little bit more than cleaning up on a beach. That's fantastic to see. Also just beach cleanups, fantastic. I love getting involved. It's just one of those things that where you can go and you can really see the difference that you've made really quickly from picking a few things up with your friends and family on the beach. So it's great to see so many of you going down there and joining in with beach cleanups and reducing your plastic use and your waste. Changing diets can have a really big impact on all ecosystems, and especially with fish. We know many fish populations are massively overfished, and other creatures in the ocean, like whales and dolphins, they need those fish. I mean, those fish originally were there for the whales and dolphins, not in the great quantities that humans hoover them up. So it's really great to see all of these different things going into the chat and all the action that you're all taking. So please do make sure that you're having a look at those. And if you're not engaging in any of those things already, maybe give them a go. Yeah. So now we're going to move on to our next section of the webinar.
That's great. Sorry, I was looking at the chat, super interesting, and it's really exciting to see, or motivating to see the different things people are doing. Right. So moving on to the next section, it would be great to talk a little bit about what the ocean used to be like and what it could be like again if we implement good policies. So why don't you, Ed, tell us about the concept of shifting baseline syndrome and how that's shaped how we view nature in the modern world?
Yeah, definitely. This shifting baseline syndrome is one of my one of my favorite things to talk about, really, because it's fascinating, but it's also really quite a troubling concept in the whole of the environmental field. It doesn't just relate to the ocean. So it refers to the phenomenon where each generation tends to perceive the natural world as normal based upon their own experiences rather than understanding it in its historical, original, or natural context. So imagine you're standing on the edge of a forest. And to you, it might look lush and vibrant, but maybe it's not as dense or as rich in species as it used to be. And your sense of normal is shaped by the forest as you see it now. However, previous generations or even just past decades might have seen it much more full, much more diverse, and a much more expansive ecosystem, teeming with many more species that you can't see right now. And the same is true for those of us who've been lucky enough to peek beneath the waves as divers or snorkelers. There are stories, one that always stands out to me from New England, where European settlers began fishing and they would just lower hand-woven baskets over the side of their small little boats and pull up enormous cod of 50 pounds or more all day long. A situation which, by today's standards, would sound like a complete myth or a legend to people that live in that part of the world, but it was absolutely true. And that is shifting baseline syndrome at work. Over time, people forget or they simply don't know what the environment used to look like before they came along. And each generation shifts their baseline of what was normal to a new, less abundant starting point. And this creates a gradual but insidious decline in our collective understanding of how ecosystems should be in their original normality and how they should function and how abundant they once were. So, in essence, when we become disconnected from the past, we lose sight of what has been lost and we accept a degraded version of nature as normal. It's like being on a slow moving conveyor belt, and every step we take forward feels like progress, but the view of the world around us gets more and more obscured from what it once was.
Yeah, that's scary. What then does shifting baseline syndrome mean when we think about whales and dolphins?
So, when it comes to whales and dolphins, shifting baseline syndrome is really particularly stark. So, over centuries of human impact, we've altered the ocean in all sorts of profound ways. Yet, for many people, those changes have been so gradual that they feel, when they look at the ocean now feels normal. But we've lost a deep connection with how abundant the ocean once was, especially when it comes to some of its most iconic species like whales and dolphins. So we're just going to pop a question in the chat for people to respond to now. Um, there we go. I'm just going to give people a couple of minutes to respond to these. Okay, as that's a quick yes or no answer, hopefully everybody's managed to click the box. So let's have a look at the answer for that. Wow, amazing. 88% of you managed to see a whale or a dolphin before. That's fantastic. Hopefully it was in the wild. And now we're going to ask you another question following on from that one. Okay, we've popped that in the chat. So yeah, just to get an idea for those of you who have seen a whale or dolphin, which is most of you, and hopefully the 12% of you who haven't seen a whale or dolphin will get to see one very soon. But it'd just be really interesting to see if you saw that whale or dolphin around where you live, or whether you had to take a trip or go and see them, maybe even in another country. I think we've got a few shore watchers on here from Scotland, so they're skewing my idea of what people were going to answer. But it does seem that a lot of you have had to travel quite far to go and see a whale or dolphin in the wild. So a couple of hundred years ago, whales would have frequented all of our coastlines, not just here where we are in the UK, with really great regularity. And if the internet existed a couple of centuries ago, whales showing up along our coastlines wouldn't make any headlines like they do today. It would just be a completely normal, everyday occurrence. In the 19th and 20th centuries, industrial whaling led to that near extinction of several different whale species, and blue whales, sperm whales, and others were decimated for their oil, for their meat and their bones. And for many generations now, we've grown up with the idea that whales are endangered or rare, and we no longer see the oceans. We no longer see what the oceans were like when whales were abundant, and their songs filling up the ocean and their migrations, weaving intricate threads all over our planet and coming past our coastlines all the time. So shifting baseline syndrome means that our idea of whale abundance has completely shifted. And if you grow up in the 1960s or 70s, you might have been told stories of whale populations before they were wiped out. But for younger generations, whales might just seem like endangered creatures now on the verge of extinction. And that's what we're talking about, is that loss of perspective. Younger generations now have never seen the world where whales were so plentiful as they used to be just 150, 200 years ago. So you can see on that graph there quite how much of an effect humans have had on all different whale populations, mostly as a result of commercial whaling. And that's what we need to understand, that it's completely normal to have those really high populations of whales in the ocean. So industrialization has played a role in our disconnection from that normality of nature, and the rise of fossil fuels and overfishing and pollution has further distanced us from our understanding of the true impact of our actions. So ships, for example, have become massive and intrusive, polluting oceans with noise and oil spills. And in the midst of our own industrial expansion, we've failed to recognize that those disruptions were eroding the ocean's very ability to support the species that had once thrived. So that disconnect is reinforced by our lack of direct interaction with the ocean as well. So for most people today, or many people, I know we have lots of shore watchers on this call, the ocean is something that we see on our screens, or we visit for a vacation, or encounter through the lens of news stories or documentaries. And not many people, or not enough people, are immersed in the rhythms and cycles of the ocean as indigenous cultures once were. And the lack of daily hands-on connection with the ocean contributes to that shifting baseline, where the deeper significance of whales and dolphins, embodying both that richness of the ocean and its vulnerability, becomes even harder for us to grasp.
Thanks, Ed. So, with science and stories, we can develop a picture of the past and also then imagine what the future could look like if we act responsibly. Could you paint us a picture of what the ocean used to be like and what it could be like again?
I can give it a go. Okay, so let's travel back in time to imagine what the ocean once was before we all started meddling with it. And if we can really connect into what that was historically, then we can start to imagine what it could be again in the future if we treat it with care and compassion and kindness. So for many coastal and indigenous peoples, the ocean was never just a body of water. It was a living entity, a vast interconnected system of spirits and animals and cycles that provided food, medicine, and a deep sense of connection and belonging. And indigenous cultures have long understood that the human well-being is intricately tied to the health of the ocean. For example, the Hawaiian concept of aloha aina, which means love of the land, but extends into the ocean as well. And the Hawaiian people have an intimate spiritual connection with the ocean, seeing it as a giver of life, where the reefs were once abundant with fish, where sea turtles swam in pristine waters, and where the migrations of whales were a sacred event signaling the deep relationship between humans and ocean life. And Hawaiian elders have often spoken of a time where the ocean was rich in life, a time where it seemed like the ocean would never, ever run out of fish, when whale songs carried messages from the deep. Similarly, the Tlingit and Haida peoples of the Pacific Northwest tell stories of a time when the ocean was so full of life that the whales and dolphins were ancestors of their people, and their presence in the water was an expression of both abundance and spiritual health. And they saw orca as a revered family member, not just an animal. And the whales' migration was woven into those people's songs and their rituals and their way of life. And in those cultures, there was a deep understanding of balance, an understanding that humans and animals were caretakers of the earth together, maintaining harmony between land, sea, and sky. And whales were not just a part of the ecosystem; they were central figures in the cosmology and the culture of so many different indigenous peoples. And it was that deep respect for whales and dolphins that led to careful stewardship practices where they would engage with the ocean in a very respectful and very thoughtful way, in the belief, under the belief that the ocean would give back to them if it was treated with reverence. So, with the path that we're currently on, the future of the ocean doesn't look very good. Um, Increasing industrialization, pollution, and noise are making it increasingly uninhabitable, as the image previously showed that was up on the screen there. And the future is, oh, there we go, it's popping back up again. So yeah, the bottom part of this image, you can see that's an image of the future of the ocean. If we carry on the current path, it's going to be continually polluted and noisy, and just really not a very nice place for ocean life to reside. Um, and that's why we need to really act now, and that's why we need to remember what the ocean was like before, lush and abundant and teeming with life, as it's a picture of what we could restore. So we can imagine a world where whales return in full force, where pods of dolphins swim in vast numbers across the horizon, where the sound of whale song fills the ocean, and coral reefs are vibrant as rainforests with their colors and creatures alive in ways that we've completely forgotten. Because the ocean was once a world where every moment of the tide and every shift of the current was understood as being part of a living, breathing system that we were part of. And we can imagine that future again. It's not a far off dream. With the right efforts, restoring habitats, creating marine protected areas, stopping overfishing, reducing pollution, moving shipping lanes, we can start to see the ocean return to some of that former glory. And we can rebuild that connection for ourselves that many indigenous cultures always understood. And by re-establishing that bond and making conservation a central part of our way forward, we create a world where the ocean is alive again and abundant with life, and a place where future generations can reconnect with it just as those before us did. So, shifting baseline syndrome has shaped our understanding of the ocean, but we have the power to shift it back. By remembering what was once lost and taking ocean action right now, we can create an ocean future that echoes those ancient rhythms of the past, a future where whales and dolphins and all ocean life thrive again. And together, if we act in unity, we can restore balance to the ocean, and in doing so, restore balance to the entire planet.
Great. So let's talk about some of that action. Actually, I know that WDC has done lots of work on climate and biodiversity and looking to reframe whales and dolphins in light of new evidence. So it would be great if you could tell us a bit about how that work has developed over the years.
Sure. So we've been working on the climate and biodiversity role of whales and dolphins for quite some time now. And the first contemporary science on particularly the topic of the whale pump came out around 15 years ago now, which led to some important resolutions at the International Whaling Commission and the Convention of Migratory Species. And resolutions in a policy sense are essentially instructions to countries who are part of those agreements. And they were asked to recognize the climate and biodiversity role of whales and dolphins and to integrate it into their national policies. And that's been picking up momentum. And I think, Silvia, you'll talk a little bit about how some of that momentum's carried on recently in a minute. And in order to make the case for policy change, we have to back up our asks with evidence. So a key thing for us at WDC has been to try and fill those key scientific knowledge gaps that exist within this topic, because science-wise, it is kind of a brand new thing. So we've funded projects into the whale pump and into a different process called the Great Whale Conveyor Belt. In fact, a research project that we funded a few years ago now has been accepted by Nature Communications, which is a leading scientific journal, and will be published in a couple of weeks. So I encourage everybody to keep an eye out on our channels for some really exciting information on that. We've also been looking at the other side of the climate coin and bringing together knowledge on the impacts of climate change on whales and dolphins. And it doesn't make pretty reading, but it only goes to demonstrate why we must, especially in the face of the current global political picture, to do everything that we can to lessen our climate impacts, speed up the energy transition, shift our dietary habits, and clean up all forms of pollution, and just generally tread a lot more lightly as we make our way around the planet. So the climate and biodiversity role of whales is now a central point of our organizational strategy and how we deliver ocean action. And we embed that messaging into all of our work, because although whales and dolphins are incredible creatures in their own right, invaluable and deserving of a completely free and safe existence, they're not just a nice thing to have. They are an essential part of a healthy and functioning ocean, which we need to be functioning properly to tackle those greatest issues that humanity and all life on Earth has ever faced. So we've been talking about how we and everything is all connected, and animal protection efforts are connected up too. So at WDC, we're really proud to be members of the World Federation for Animals. And so, Silvia, tell us a little bit about the work of the Federation and how it's been working with WDC on our shared goals.
Sure, would love to. Yeah, so as I mentioned during my intro earlier today, the World Federation for Animals, or WFA, is a group of now over 70 animal protection organizations from around the world. And we work together to make sure that animal welfare is part of global decisions on important issues like health, food, and the environment. We want a world where animals are treated with care and respect. And to make that happen, we work closely with governments and policymakers worldwide. And to get governments on our side, it's not just about telling them that animals deserve kindness, so they absolutely do. It's also about showing how animals help keep our planet healthy. And whales and dolphins are a perfect example. So thanks to the amazing work of WDC, we understand more now more than ever how these animals play a big role in fighting climate change and supporting ocean ecosystems. And I mean, today, some of the examples that you've shared are very fitting on why WDC is so essential to the work that we do at WFA. Because WDC helps us round out our collective knowledge with the long-standing expertise around marine mammals and ecosystems. So we work with governments and policymakers because we believe that policy work is key to turn this knowledge into action. So that's what we focus on. We engage with international decision makers to make sure that they have the right information to shape up policies that end up protecting animals and their habitats for the long term. And because we are a membership organization, it is the knowledge and the passion of groups like WDC and other NGOs that is what allow us to speak smart and effectively for animals in global spaces like the United Nations. We believe that only by bringing the animal protection movement together, we can really make a difference for animals everywhere. And obviously, well, working with WDC is part of that mission. It's a big part of that mission.
Thank you. We had some pretty major events at the end of last year for climate and biodiversity in the form of CBD COP16 and UNFCCC, the climate COP29. So tell us a little bit about what was achieved there for animals.
Yeah, that was an intense period, but they are perfect examples of why working as a movement pays off. So first we had the biodiversity COP16 here in Colombia, and then we have the climate the climate COP, the COP29 in Azerbaijan. And they are actually really good examples of how the World Federation for Animals works to make sure that animals are part of the global solutions for the issues that are facing our planet. This conference brings together countries, government representatives from all over the world to make important decisions about protecting nature and fighting climate change. So at the Biodiversity COP here in Colombia, which was around October last year, we focused on making sure that animals were included in those decisions. So what do I mean by that? One of the decisions that was adopted at the Biodiversity Conference was on biodiversity and climate change. And in that decision, countries agreed that protecting and restoring nature, including animal populations, is a powerful way to tackle climate change and prevent disasters. And this was huge. There was a shout out about the fact that specifically animals are part of protecting and restoring nature. Nature isn't an abstract, and all countries agreed on this. They actually agreed that animals help keep our planet healthy. That means that governments agree that when we protect animals, we are protecting ecosystems, like we've been discussing today, and helps us absorb carbon and helps us adapt to climate change. And this decision also helped encourage other countries in the language to better protect species and habitats that are key to the carbon cycle. So these decisions, and I don't know if is very clear for everyone why we focus so much on these decisions, but this language is so important for advocates like us because we can use it as tools in our arsenal. We can go back to governments and remind them of those decisions that they adopted at these COPs. And so we've effectively seen new opportunities to advocate for stronger policies to protect wildlife like whales and dolphins and reduce harmful activities like hunting and pollution. But to get to those outcomes at the biodiversity conference, for example, there were many things that we did for WDC. Mostly it was the result of teamwork. So we worked with many organizations from around the world that came to Cali, and prior to the conference, we analyzed the draft decisions that countries published ahead of the conference, and we identified ways in which they could be strengthened by bringing in animal welfare language. And so we created a policy document with our recommendations and shared it with the governments before the conference to get their support. Then once we were in Cali, we held bilateral meetings with different government representatives to discuss their proposals and answer their questions. And because of the way we work as a team, it meant that we could reach more policymakers in our lobbying efforts. And we, of course, also organized events during which we raised awareness of why animal welfare is essential for tackling biodiversity loss and climate change. And so we left Cali quite happy with the outcome of seeing animals, getting a shout out in the official decisions. And then we moved on to Azerbaijan, to the big climate conference, where we brought a similar message, where we focused more on climate action. And then we launched an Animals for Climate Action tool with WDC. And this is an online tool that helps government make smarter decisions by showing how protecting animals can support climate goals. It offers them practical solutions like how to improve farming and what we eat, how to protect wildlife, how to support fair changes away from industrial animal farming, all of these policies and measures, which actually helps animals thrive and ecosystems store more carbon. And yeah, so both conferences really were really powerful examples of how when we work together as a movement, we can actually make a difference. And it's thanks to uniting voices with members like WDC that we are actually making real progress in seeing animals getting to be recognized as part of the solution to the planet crisis?
Yeah, it was a whirlwind. Those two COPs, and we had as WDC, IWC in Peru just before that. But it's super inspiring to work alongside WFA and the other members as part of the COPs. But we know that this work never ends, and there's always more work for us to do, especially in light of the kind of global political situation at the moment. So, Silvia, tell us a little bit about WFA's plans for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It never ends. So it is that same message that we plan to looking ahead, just focus even more on showing how protecting animals and their habitat is essential for tackling climate change. So in 2025, what we're planning with WDC is to really work even more closely with the UN climate change process, the UNFCCC, to ensure that this message is heard loud and clear. So we're looking at having more conversations with governments that are interested in leading this effort with us and encouraging them to bring other countries on board. We really want to see animal protection, protecting animals, to become a key part of the global climate policies. We don't want this to be an afterthought. We want it to become central to the climate discussion. So, yeah, I would say stay tuned because we do have a lot planned as we build momentum leading up to the big climate conference in Brazil, COP30, by the end of the year. And we are really excited to keep pushing this important work forward. But that's, yeah, for us, obviously, including WDC. But yeah, curious to, and I'm sure everybody's keen to also know a little bit more about specific plans for WDC.
Yeah, so obviously we'll be along with the WFA team in Brazil later on this year. Later on in February, Convention of Migratory Species is running an expert climate change workshop, which we'll be attending to feed in from both angles. So impacts of climate change itself on whale and dolphin populations, but also presenting new evidence that we've been funding as to why we need to recover whale and dolphin populations because of their climate benefits. And also linked to that, over the course of this year, we'll be publishing more of that science of what whales and dolphins are doing in the ocean to help keep it resilient to change and healthy. And hopefully we'll see some new projects coming online in that space as well, some quite big, significant ones. Of course, there's the UN Ocean Conference in July, which only happens once every 3 years. So that's a pretty significant moment for the ocean policy space. And we're working with the team at WFA and others to make sure that we're getting in some really positive language linking back to the role of wild animals and whales and dolphins. So that's great. So now we're going to head into sort of like the Q&A session. So we still got a little bit of time, and many of you kind of eager beaver supporters of ours have sent over some questions in advance. So we're going to go through a few of those now. Thank you so much to everybody that did send over a question. We don't have time to answer them all, but we will make sure we get back to you. So one question that we've got is, how many whales do we need to recover? What types and by when? So I think we've got a moral responsibility to provide the conditions for all whale species to recover and to allow them to recover back to their pre-exploitation level. So that graph that we popped up earlier just shows how much we've reduced populations, and that is really wholly on us. A lot of it stems from the direct killing of those animals, but they're not recovering very quickly or as quickly as they could because of all of the other different threats that have happened in the ocean since we stopped killing them. So we need to recover all of them because they're all supposed to be there. They're all playing their own individual roles and niches in the ocean, and the effects of that not happening are kind of unknown because we've not been studying it. But it's like taking 90 puzzle pieces out of a 100-piece puzzle. That's what we've done. So we don't know what it looks like, but it's definitely not what should be there. And we have a duty to, I think the question was when, to do that as soon as we possibly can. We need to put all those building blocks of nature back as quickly as we can, so that it can be that resilient system that has given us everything as a species and the civilization to thrive. So we got one more question, which I think I'm going to throw this one at you, Sylvia. So why is not enough being done? And what do you think are the biggest obstacles to protecting the ocean and its inhabitants? And what can be done effectively to overcome those obstacles? Big question.
Yeah, very small. Perfect. Why is there not enough being done? I ask myself that every day. But I can share, yeah, some of my thoughts in terms of the biggest obstacles. The ocean is a shared global resource, but international cooperation is often fragmented due to political boundaries. I read somewhere recently that in politics there is no world, only countries. But for these migratory animals, there are no countries. It's the ocean. And this mismatch makes it really hard to create policies that truly protect marine life across borders. Um, I think, fortunately, we're starting to see efforts to bridge this gap. One promising step, for example, is the new High Seas Treaty, which aims to protect the parts of the oceans that don't belong to any one country. So, if countries actually follow through, it could help set up marine protected areas in international waters and ensure better regulation of fishing and shipping activities. So, and I think another big obstacle, and I think I saw somewhere in the chat reference to this as well, is the economic pressures that are, posing another significant hurdle. Many countries are overly reliant on ocean industries like fishing and shipping and, well, tourism as well, which can lead to short-term decisions that harm marine ecosystems in the long run. The good news, though, is that we know now, the world knows now, that we don't have to choose between the economy and the environment. And some countries are actually showing leadership by creating MPAs, marine protected areas, and investing in ocean restoration projects. And these efforts demonstrate that it's actually possible to balance economic development with protecting marine life. In fact, in the Animals for Climate Action that I just mentioned briefly earlier, that we launched in Azerbaijan, and I know the link was also dropped in the chat. There, we've actually tried to identify some real world examples where there are good policies being put forward in this regard. So if anybody wants to, after this, have a look and get some inspiration of where good things are happening and leave some hope, then I would invite you to check it out.
Yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment. It was really great working on the production of that tool and that website with WFA, because it can seem overwhelming. And I've seen a lot of messages in the chat of people that feel a little bit hopeless with the situation. But I think generally in the media they like to put out negative news, but there is a lot of really positive stuff happening. There's a lot of amazing people that are working really, really hard all around the world to make change happen, and there are some really great examples of conservation and positive animal welfare, and all of that links back to climate and biodiversity benefits. So I really would encourage people to go and check that out. So let's have a little look into the Q&A that we've got. We've only had one question come through, so if anybody's got any questions for us, we have got a few more minutes to answer some. But we've got one in here, which is it's quite a big question, which is how do we stop commercial whaling in places like Iceland, Japan, Norway? It is challenging. It's something that it's a core part of what we do here at WDC, is trying to end that direct and unnecessary killing of whales. But each country is very, very different. They've all got very different histories, very different stakeholders that are involved, and different cultures. And we have to deeply understand that from our perspective, it may not be aligned with the perspective of local people. So what we do at WDC is work over long time periods to really engage with people that are in those countries, because it just doesn't work if we turn up as an organization from another country and tell them how to do their how or what to do. They're just not going to listen. We wouldn't like that if people started showing up here and told us what to do. So what we do is work with local organizations and work a lot with youth groups and communities so that we can inspire a new generation of people. A lot of it's awareness raising. I mean, it amazes me every time a survey comes out in Norway, how many people who live in Norway and are Norwegian and they don't know that they're a whaling nation. So a lot of the time it's just exposing the realities to people and providing them with information so that they can make informed choices when it comes to things like elections, and they can vote for parties that are looking to engage in more environmentally responsible practices and end whaling in those countries. And there are parties that run with a ticket to end those practices, but people need to know about it. So it can be a long-term game, but WDC has been working uh, with communities in Iceland for a really long time now, and we ran whale watching workshops back in the 1990s with whalers, and helped them transition from an exploitative industry to people who now make far more money from taking people out to go and see the whales rather than killing them. So it's a long game, and things shift, and it's a very, very political world, and you're up against very rich, wealthy international governments when it comes to ending commercial whaling. But we are we're carrying on the fight, and we're responsive and we're mobile, and we will bring it to an end. Certainly a career goal of mine. Um, I can't see any more questions in the Q&A, but we've had one pop into the chat, which is, are we making progress with reducing the number of whales and dolphins in captivity? So um, I think I think that's I would say yes. In the certainly in the Western world, so referring to places like the US and Europe, we are seeing an increased awareness of people of the impacts on the welfare of those animals. You know, they can't be properly looked after in captivity or live any kind of a pleasant life, and so there are, people are attending those facilities less, and so it's less of an economic driving force to keep those kind of establishments open. Um, but we are seeing increased numbers of establishments open up in other parts of the world as other parts of the world develop. So there's new captive facilities opening in China and Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Um, so we're now having to engage in new parts of the world with different cultures on the same kind of messaging that we know has been successful elsewhere. So it's that kind of thing where you solve a problem somewhere, and then another problem pops up somewhere else. But we're armed with the people and the experience in the community, and working through with our partners at WFA to kind of dig into new areas of the world and raise awareness so that we can bring captivity of whales and dolphins to an end. So I can't see any more questions. So I'm just going to say thank you all so much for joining us this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. And thank you for all of your incredible support and your generosity. It makes everything that we do here at WDC, from protecting whales and dolphins to safeguarding the ocean and its future, possible. And it's really because of supporters like you that we can continue to do the work that we do. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's webinar, and shortly be receiving a survey by email in the next couple of days. If you can share any thoughts or suggestions on how we can continue to make these webinars as engaging as possible, or ideas for what you'd like us to talk about in the future, then please do. You'll also receive a link to the recording, and we'll follow up on any questions that we didn't get to cover today. And once again, just thank you so much for your time, for your passion, for your commitment to this cause, to our shared cause. And together, we are making a real difference for whales and dolphins and the ocean, and by extension, the planet. So have a great rest of your day, wherever you are, and we'll see you again soon.